The moment someone tells you they don't belong to you anymore, you discover whether they're asking for freedom or preparing to leave. My wife said those words to me on a Thursday night at 11:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because I stared at the glowing numbers on my truck's dashboard for a long time after the call ended, wondering how 18 years of marriage could be reduced to a single sentence. The highway stretched ahead of me, empty and dark beneath the Texas sky. A warm wind pushed against the side of the cab, carrying the smell of dry grass and distant rain. I'd just finished checking one of our distribution yards outside Fort Worth. It had been a long day, the kind of day that starts before sunrise and ends long after most people are home eating dinner. I picked up my phone and called Rebecca because that's what husbands do. At least that's what I thought husbands did. The phone rang twice before she answered. Music echoed in the background. Laughter, glasses clinking, voices I didn't recognize. "Hey," I said, "just checking in. You still at dinner?" There was a pause. Not a long one. Just enough to feel strange. "Yes, Cole. I'm at dinner." Her voice sounded irritated before I even said another word. "Okay," I replied. "You think you'll be home soon?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then came the sigh. Anyone who's been married long enough knows that sigh. The one that says you're already losing an argument you didn't know existed. "Why?" she asked. "Just wondering. You always need to know where I am." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I was just asking." "No, you're checking up on me." The words landed harder than they should have. Because deep down, I knew this conversation wasn't really about that night. It was about something much bigger. Something that had been growing quietly between us for months. Maybe longer. I looked out through the windshield as mile markers slipped past under the headlights. "Rebecca, I'm not checking up on you." She laughed. Not the laugh I fell in love with when we were 24 years old. Not the laugh that used to fill our first apartment when we couldn't afford furniture and ate pizza sitting on moving boxes. This laugh was colder, sharper, like it belonged to someone else. "Cole, stop calling me. I'm not your property." The silence afterward felt enormous. Bigger than the highway. Bigger than the night itself. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. 18 years. 2 kids. A mortgage. Holidays. Vacations. Hospital visits. Birthdays. Every ordinary Tuesday that quietly becomes a lifetime. And somehow it had led here. To a woman speaking to me like I was a stranger asking too many questions. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives calmly, quietly, like a door closing in another room. I took a slow breath. The dashboard lights reflected across the windshield. My pulse felt steady, almost too steady. Then I said the only thing that came to mind. "Perfect." She didn't answer. "Then don't come home." The line went silent. For the first time all night, she seemed surprised. I could almost hear her trying to decide whether I'd actually said it, whether I meant it. I did. A second later, the call disconnected. No goodbye, no argument, nothing, just silence. I kept driving. 10 miles, maybe 15. I don't remember. The road blurred together after that. Looking back now, I realized something important. That phone call wasn't the moment my marriage ended. It was the moment I finally admitted it had been ending for a very long time. What I didn't know then was that before sunrise the next morning, my phone would ring again. And the woman on the other end would tell me something that changed everything. People like to think marriages fall apart because of one big moment. One terrible decision. One explosive argument. That would have been easier to understand. The truth is usually much quieter. Looking back, I can see the small cracks now. The ones I ignored because I was too busy believing in the version of our life that existed in my head. My name is Cole Harrison. I am 43 years old, born and raised in Texas. For most of my adult life, I measured success the same way my father did. Show up, work hard, keep your word, take care of your family. Everything else would sort itself out. At least that was what I believed. 18 years earlier, Rebecca and I met at a charity fundraiser in Dallas. She had a smile that made crowded rooms feel smaller. The kind of smile that made you think life might be easier standing next to her. Back then, neither of us had much. I owned one aging delivery truck and rented a warehouse that leaked every time it rained. She worked in marketing and spent her weekends helping local nonprofits organize events. We built our life together the slow way. One paycheck at a time. One sacrifice at a time. There were years when every dollar mattered. Years when vacations meant driving 3 hours to a lake instead of flying somewhere tropical. Years when we bought secondhand furniture because the mortgage came first. We were never rich, but we were building something. Or at least I thought we were. The logistics company grew. One truck became 3. 3 became 10. Eventually, we had contracts across North Texas. Employees who depended on me. Customers who trusted me. Long days became normal. 4:30 alarms. Endless meetings. Late-night calls. I told myself every hour away from home was an investment in our future. Rebecca always said she understood. She would kiss me goodbye in the mornings and tell me she was proud of what we were creating. I believed her. Maybe that was my mistake. The strange thing is that if someone had asked me a year earlier whether my marriage was in trouble, I would have laughed. We still ate dinner together most nights. We still attended our children's school events. We still took family photos every Christmas. From the outside, everything looked solid. But appearances can be dangerous. They hide things. They hide distance. They hide loneliness. They hide the moment two people stop walking beside each other and start moving in separate directions. Rebecca changed slowly enough that I barely noticed it happening. First it was new friends. Then more nights out. Then dinners that seemed to happen every week instead of every month. New restaurants. New social circles. New stories that never seemed to include me. Whenever I asked about them, she smiled and said she was finally enjoying herself again. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to be the husband who trusted his wife. So I ignored the uneasy feeling growing in the back of my mind. The feeling that I was becoming a guest in my own marriage. There were little moments. Small things. The kind of details that seem meaningless until you connect them later. Her phone never left her hand. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Weekend plans appeared without discussion. Sometimes she would sit across from me at the dinner table and look completely present, yet somehow impossibly far away. The hardest part was that I kept making excuses for everything. Stress, work, middle age, a temporary rough patch. People who have been married a long time become experts at explaining away what they do not want to see. I certainly was. But one memory stands out now more than any other. About 6 months before that phone call, we attended a neighborhood barbecue. The sun was setting. Children were running through sprinklers. Music drifted across backyards. Rebecca stood with a group of women near the patio laughing about something. I remember watching her from across the yard. She looked happy, happier than she looked at home. When our eyes met, she smiled politely. Politely. Not warmly. Not lovingly. Just politely. That was the first time I felt it. The first time I wondered whether I was losing something I could not name. At the time, I pushed the thought aside. I wish I had not. Because if I had listened to that feeling, maybe the next phone call would not have shocked me so much. And as I pulled into my driveway that Thursday night, staring at the dark windows of a house that suddenly felt unfamiliar, I had no idea that before morning arrived, someone else would begin filling in the pieces I could not see. The house was silent when I walked through the front door. Not peaceful, not comforting, just silent. The kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder than it should. My keys landed on the kitchen counter with a sharp metallic click. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Rebecca still had not come home. I stood there for a long time staring at the empty kitchen. The same kitchen where we had celebrated birthdays, hosted Thanksgiving dinners, and helped our kids finish science projects at the table. It looked exactly the same. That was the strange part. The room had not changed. I had. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down. My phone remained face down beside me. For years I had been the one reaching out first. Calling, texting, checking in, fixing misunderstandings before they became arguments. That night I did none of those things. I simply sat there and listened to the quiet. Around 1:30 in the morning, I finally went upstairs. Rebecca's side of the closet was half empty, not because she had moved out, because she seemed to live somewhere else more often these days. Business dinners, networking events, weekend retreats, girls' trips. The explanations changed. The absence remained. Looking back, that should have been my warning. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above the bed. Sleep refused to come. Every memory seemed to arrive at once. Rebecca laughing on our wedding day. Rebecca holding our newborn daughter. Rebecca standing beside me when I signed the paperwork for our second warehouse. For a long time those memories felt comforting. That night they felt confusing. Around 4:50 in the morning, my phone vibrated against the nightstand. The sound cut through the darkness like an alarm. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. I answered on the third ring. Hello. For a moment, there was only breathing. Then a woman's voice. Nervous. Hesitant. Is this Cole Harrison? I sat up immediately. Yes. Another pause. My name is Melissa. Her voice trembled slightly. You do not know me. I rubbed my eyes and checked the clock again. 4:51. Okay. I am sorry for calling so early. She sounded like someone forcing herself to continue. But I did not know what else to do. The room suddenly felt colder. What is this about? Silence. Then a long exhale. It is about your wife. My stomach tightened. Not because of what she said. Because of how she said it. People do not call strangers before sunrise unless something is wrong. What about my wife? Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear traffic somewhere in the background. A car door closing. The distant sound of a passing truck. Finally she spoke. I think there are things you deserve to know. I stood up and walked toward the window. Dawn had not arrived yet. The neighborhood remained dark and still beneath the Texas sky. Who are you? I asked. I am married to Daniel Foster. The name meant nothing to me. At least not yet. Okay. Daniel works with Rebecca. The words settled heavily into the room. Suddenly, I remembered hearing that name before. A few times. Casual mentions. Office stories. Work events. Nothing memorable. Nothing important. Or so I thought. Why are you calling me? I asked quietly. Melissa hesitated. When she finally answered, her voice sounded tired. The voice of someone carrying a burden for too long. Because 6 months ago I started noticing things that did not make sense. I felt my pulse begin to rise. Slow. Steady. Not panic. Not anger. Something else. The feeling a man gets when pieces of a puzzle begin sliding toward each other. What kind of things? I asked. Outside, the first faint light of morning appeared on the horizon. Inside, Melissa took a breath and prepared to tell me something that would change the way I viewed the last year of my life. Melissa did not rush. She spoke the way people speak when they are afraid of being wrong and even more afraid of being right. I stood by the bedroom window watching the darkness slowly give way to morning while she explained how her doubts had started. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just small details that refused to fit together. Daniel had begun working later more often. Business dinners appeared on his calendar with increasing frequency. Weekend conferences seemed to multiply. At first she believed every explanation. Why would she not? Trust is built over years and usually destroyed much more slowly than people imagine. Then one evening she noticed a receipt in his jacket pocket from a restaurant nearly 50 miles away from the office. The date matched a night he claimed to be attending a company meeting downtown. She asked him about it. He laughed and brushed it aside. Said a client changed locations at the last minute. The answer sounded reasonable, yet something about it stayed with her. A few weeks later, another inconsistency appeared. Then another. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. As Melissa spoke, I found myself remembering similar moments inside my own house. Rebecca returning home unusually late with explanations that technically made sense, but somehow felt incomplete. New events. New obligations. New reasons she could not make family dinners. At the time, I had accepted every explanation because that was easier than asking difficult questions. I am not calling to accuse anyone, Melissa said carefully. I just think you should know what I found. Her voice remained steady now, like someone who had finally decided to stop carrying something alone. I closed my eyes briefly. What exactly did you find? There was a pause. Papers shuffled on her end of the line. 3 months ago, I started keeping notes. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Notes. Not suspicions. Not feelings. Notes. Facts. Dates. Times. Details. The kind of information people collect when their instincts refuse to stay quiet. Melissa explained that she began documenting business trips, dinners, and events Daniel attended. Mostly because she wanted to prove herself wrong. She wanted evidence that everything was normal. Instead, the opposite happened. Several events Daniel described never appeared on company schedules. Some meetings supposedly held at the office took place elsewhere. A few names kept appearing repeatedly. One of them was Rebecca. The room felt smaller. Not because Melissa was revealing anything definitive. Because she was connecting dots I had spent months ignoring. Outside, the first sunlight touched the rooftops across the street. A sprinkler system clicked on somewhere nearby. Water hissed across green lawns. Ordinary suburban life continued exactly as it always had. Meanwhile, my understanding of my marriage was quietly shifting beneath my feet. "There is more," Melissa said. I did not answer. I simply listened. Last month there was a conference in Austin. I remembered it immediately. Rebecca had attended. 3 days away. Networking. Professional development. At least that was what she told me. Melissa continued. Daniel said he attended the same conference. I waited. The conference ended Friday afternoon. Another pause. Neither of them came home until Saturday evening. I stared through the window at the growing daylight. My reflection stared back from the glass. Older than I remembered. More tired. Maybe they stayed for extra meetings, I said. The words sounded weak even to me. Melissa sighed softly. Not judgmental. Just sad. That is exactly what I told myself. The silence stretched between us. Long enough for uncomfortable truths to settle. Then she said something I could not stop thinking about. Cole, sometimes the hardest part is not discovering what happened. The hardest part is realizing how much effort you spent avoiding the possibility. I leaned my forehead against the cool window pane. Because deep down I knew she was right. For months I had explained away every concern, every strange feeling, every warning sign. Not because I trusted completely, because I wanted to. And there is a difference. The morning sun continued climbing higher. Melissa took a slow breath before speaking again. There is one more thing you need to know. The seriousness in her voice immediately caught my attention. My stomach tightened. What is it? For several seconds, she said nothing. Then finally she answered. And the words that followed changed the direction of everything. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than anything Melissa had told me so far. Then she finally continued. 2 weeks ago, I found something I was never supposed to see. Her voice dropped lower. Careful. Controlled. Like she had repeated these words to herself 100 times before saying them out loud. I remained standing by the window. The sun was fully rising now, washing the neighborhood in pale gold light. A jogger moved down the sidewalk across the street. Someone backed a pickup truck out of a driveway. The world looked completely normal. My life no longer felt that way. What did you find? I asked. Melissa exhaled slowly. A reservation. I frowned. A reservation? A lake resort outside Austin. The name meant nothing to me. At least not immediately. Then she continued. The reservation was made for the weekend after that conference. My stomach tightened. And the conference ended Friday afternoon. Her words came carefully, one piece at a time. The reservation started Friday night and ended Sunday morning. I closed my eyes briefly. Not because the information proved anything by itself. Because I already knew where this conversation was heading. Melissa did not need to spell it out. She explained that the reservation confirmation had been sent to an email account Daniel rarely used. An account he assumed she did not know existed. She discovered it while helping him locate tax documents on a laptop they shared. At first she thought it was a mistake. Then she noticed something else. A second name attached to the reservation. Not Rebecca's name, but a name she recognized from company records. A generic registration name used for guest bookings connected to corporate travel. Impossible to identify directly. Conveniently impossible. I spent days trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation, Melissa admitted. Maybe there was a company retreat. Maybe there were clients involved. Her voice cracked slightly before recovering. Then I called the resort. I said nothing. She continued. I asked a simple question. I told them I was organizing future events and wanted to confirm what kind of accommodations were booked that weekend. Another pause. It was a private lakeside cabin. I stared across the street without actually seeing anything. The pieces were beginning to align in ways I did not like. Not because of certainty. Because of probability. Because too many separate details pointed in the same direction. Melissa was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice sounded exhausted. Cole, I am not calling because I want revenge. I am not calling because I hate your wife. I barely know her. I believed her. Then why are you calling? The answer came immediately. Because somebody should have told me sooner. Those words landed harder than everything else. Not because they contained new information. Because they contained truth. Nobody wants to be the last person to understand what is happening in their own life. The room felt strangely calm. I expected anger. I expected panic. Instead, I felt clarity beginning to replace confusion. For months, I had been treating individual events as separate incidents. A late dinner. A canceled plan. A changed attitude. A cold response. One by one, they were easy to dismiss. Together, they formed a picture that was becoming impossible to ignore. Melissa cleared her throat. There is one final thing. I tightened my grip on the phone. Go ahead. Yesterday evening, Daniel left his office early. My heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower. How do you know? Because I was there. She paused. I was planning to confront him. The sunlight continued spilling across the bedroom floor. Did you? I asked. No. Why not? The answer arrived in a whisper. Because he was not alone. The words hung in the air between us. Heavy. Unfinished. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next would force me to stop pretending that the warning signs were only warning signs. My eyes remained fixed on the window as Melissa's last sentence settled into the room. He was not alone. She did not need to explain what that meant. The silence between us carried enough weight on its own. For a few seconds, I heard nothing except the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of a lawn mower starting somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet everything felt different now. Did you see who he was with? I finally asked. Melissa took a slow breath. Yes. My grip tightened around the phone. And another pause. Long enough to make my chest feel heavy. It was Rebecca. The words arrived quietly. No drama. No accusation. Just a simple statement. Somehow that made them hit harder. I closed my eyes. Not because I was shocked. The shock had already passed somewhere between the late-night phone call and the sunrise. What I felt now was something colder. Clarity. Melissa continued speaking. She explained that she had parked across the street from Daniel's office, intending to confront him as he left work. Instead, she watched Daniel and Rebecca walk out together. They were laughing about something. Relaxed. Comfortable. Familiar. They got into the same vehicle and drove away. Melissa followed for a while before turning back. She never confronted either of them. She never created a scene. She simply went home and sat with what she had seen. Maybe there is an explanation, she said quietly. Maybe there is something I do not know. But I stopped believing in coincidences a long time ago. Neither of us spoke for several moments. The strange thing was that I agreed with her. Not because I possessed undeniable proof. Because every explanation required more faith than the facts themselves. Looking back, I realized how many opportunities one had been given to see the truth. Rebecca protecting her phone like a state secret. The endless dinners. The conferences. The sudden irritation whenever I asked ordinary questions. Even that sentence from the night before echoed through my mind. I am not your property. At the time it sounded cruel. Now it sounded defensive. Like someone arguing against an accusation I had never actually made. Melissa eventually cleared her throat. I am sorry, Cole. The sincerity in her voice surprised me. You did not create this situation, I replied. You did not owe me this call. Maybe not, she said. But somebody needed to know. After we ended the conversation, I remained standing beside the window for a long time. The neighborhood had fully awakened. School buses rolled through nearby intersections. Delivery trucks moved down residential streets. Life continued exactly as it always had. I wished answers came as easily. Around 7:30, my phone lit up. Rebecca. The screen displayed her name and photo exactly as it had thousands of times before. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Then I answered. Morning, she said. Her voice sounded normal. Casual. As if the previous night had never happened. As if a stranger had not just spent an hour describing a version of my marriage I could no longer ignore. Morning, I replied. I stayed with a friend after dinner, she said. I figured it was better than driving home late. The lie arrived so smoothly, it almost sounded rehearsed. Maybe it was. Months earlier I might have accepted it without question. That version of me was gone. I see, I said. She hesitated. Probably waiting for an argument. Waiting for questions. Waiting for the familiar cycle. None came. Are you angry? She asked. I looked out at the bright Texas morning. No. Another pause. Longer this time. You sound different. I almost smiled. Because for the first time in a very long time, she was right. Something had changed. Not overnight. Not because of one conversation. Because the pieces finally fit together. And once a man sees the picture clearly, he can never go back to pretending it is unfinished. I need the text of part 6, or at least the title and parts 1 to 6 summary, to continue the same characters, timeline, setting, and plot accurately. Without that context, I cannot reliably write part 7 while keeping continuity consistent. Please provide part 6. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. The kind of place where lives changed with signatures instead of speeches. I sat alone on a bench near the far window, watching late afternoon sunlight stretch across the marble floor. For the first time in months, my phone was silent. No accusations. No dramatic messages. No attempts to rewrite history. Just silence. Strange how something that once felt lonely now felt like peace. My attorney stepped out of a conference room carrying a thin folder. He did not smile right away. He simply handed me the documents and nodded. That was enough. The facts had done what emotions never could. They had cleared the fog. Across the hall, she sat with her lawyer, staring at the floor. Gone was the confidence she had carried through the early stages of this battle. Gone were the assumptions that everything would fall into place the way she expected. Reality has a way of arriving quietly. It does not kick down doors. It simply walks in and takes a seat. I opened the folder and read the final terms. Every financial record had been verified. Every timeline had been confirmed. Every claim had been examined. The truth stood exactly where it had stood from the beginning. Unmoved. Unshaken. Solid. My attorney leaned closer. This is probably the last difficult day you will have to carry. I looked through the window toward the parking lot below. Cars moved in and out beneath a bright American sky. People rushed through ordinary afternoons. Somewhere a father was coaching Little League. Somewhere a couple was buying their first house. Somewhere a man was learning a lesson he never wanted to learn. Life kept moving. It always did. The hearing itself lasted less than an hour. Months of tension compressed into a handful of measured conversations. No raised voices. No dramatic scenes. Just facts, records, and decisions. By the time the judge concluded the proceedings, I felt surprisingly calm. Not victorious. Not angry. Simply finished. There is a difference. Victory depends on someone losing. Peace does not. Peace arrives when the fight no longer owns you. When we walked out of the courtroom, she called my name. I stopped, but did not turn immediately. The sound carried memories with it. Holidays. Road trips. Shared dreams. Years that once felt permanent. Eventually I faced her. Her eyes looked tired. Older somehow. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I think she had been carrying for a long time. When did you stop believing in us? The answer came easier than I expected. I did not stop believing all at once. I said, it happened one disappointment at a time. One choice at a time. One broken promise at a time. She looked away. The wind moved through the parking lot, lifting loose strands of hair across her face. I felt sadness then, not because I wanted the marriage back, not because I regretted the decision. Sadness because some endings arrive long before people admit they are over. We stood there for another moment before she quietly nodded. Then she walked toward her car. No dramatic farewell. No final argument. Just two people heading in different directions. I watched until her vehicle disappeared beyond the courthouse exit. Then I looked down at the folder in my hands and closed it. The chapter was over. That evening, I drove home with the windows down. The highway stretched ahead beneath a fading orange sunset. My truck hummed steadily beneath me. For the first time in a very long while, the future felt larger than the past. I was not thinking about revenge. I was not thinking about what had been taken from me. I was thinking about what remained. My health, my work, my family, my dignity. The things that matter rarely make headlines. They simply carry you forward. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I realized something important. The truth had not saved my marriage. It had saved me. And sometimes that is enough. 3 months later, the house felt different. Not because the walls had changed or because the furniture sat in new places. It felt different because the weight was gone. Every room carried a kind of quiet I had almost forgotten existed. The kind that does not come from loneliness. The kind that comes from clarity. Saturday mornings returned to simple things. Coffee on the back porch. The sound of birds moving through the trees. A newspaper folded beside my chair. No tension waiting behind the next conversation. No wondering what was true and what was not. Just peace. Real peace. The kind that cannot be purchased, negotiated, or borrowed. It has to be earned. Work became easier too. Not because the projects changed, but because my mind was no longer divided. I stopped looking backward. I stopped replaying old conversations. I stopped searching for explanations that would never satisfy me. Some questions do not have answers that heal. Sometimes healing begins when you stop asking them. One afternoon, I was organizing old files in the garage when I found a cardboard box filled with photographs. Vacations. Birthday parties. Family gatherings. A lifetime preserved in glossy rectangles. I sat there for nearly an hour looking through them, and something surprised me. The pain was gone. The memories remained, but the pain no longer lived inside them. I could appreciate the good years without pretending the bad years never happened. That felt like progress. That felt like freedom. A few weeks later, I received a short message. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just a simple note wishing me well. I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down. There was no anger in me. No desire to reopen old wounds. Some chapters deserve respect, but they still need to end. I wished her well silently and moved forward. Because that is what life asks of us. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Forward. As summer arrived, I found myself saying yes to things again. Weekend road trips. Baseball games. Family cookouts. Conversations that had nothing to do with lawyers, evidence, or courtrooms. The future slowly filled the spaces the past had occupied. 1 mile at a time. 1 day at a time. 1 decision at a time. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see when this journey began. The hardest part was never losing the marriage. The hardest part was losing the version of myself that believed I had to carry everyone else's choices on my shoulders. Once I let that go, everything changed. The sun still rose each morning. Opportunities still appeared. Life still offered reasons to smile. Sometimes we just need enough distance to notice them again. Last week I stood in my backyard watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. The same backyard where so many difficult thoughts once followed me. The same backyard where I questioned everything. This time, I felt gratitude. Not for what happened. No one asks for heartbreak. No one asks for betrayal. But gratitude for what I learned. Strength is not found in winning every battle. Strength is found in surviving the battles that try to change who you are. And if there is one thing I hope this story leaves behind, it is this. Protect your dignity. Trust actions more than promises. And never let someone convince you that your value depends on their opinion of you. Because it does not. Your value was there long before they arrived, and it remains long after they leave. Now I would genuinely like to know your thoughts. If you had been in my position, what would you have done differently? Do you think forgiveness and moving on are stronger than holding on to resentment? Share your perspective in the comments because every experience teaches something valuable. And if this story stayed with you until the very end, consider subscribing to the channel for more real-life, inspired stories about resilience, hard lessons, and finding your way forward when life takes an unexpected turn. Sometimes the ending is not about getting even. Sometimes the ending is simply becoming the person who no longer needs to.